guitar constant, and these are the flute and piccolo scales for the Ontario Provincial Honor Band. Alright, so we're going to start with a C chromatic 3 octave. Sometimes for these ones, I find the trickiest fingerings are getting up into that 3rd octave from sort of the G sharp, A sharp, B, and then the C. So the bar in particular, that 5th bar of the excerpt, is one to look at with particular detail. The choice between that 3 octave C chromatic or the 2 octave A flat chromatic, also slurred. So we'll do the A flat chromatic as well. Now for both of these chromatic scales, some of the fingering switches that might be particularly tricky are going to be sort of from that A flat, G, G flat, F, E natural, that sort of range. So to get those really, really even, I would definitely recommend working on that with a metronome, going that over quite slowly and then speeding it up. We also have 2 major scales, and then there are 2 octave arpeggios as well, B flat major and D flat major. So we'll start with B flat major. It is the friendlier key, but for this one it's really important to give a lot of support for those lower notes, and keep sort of grounded with a nice open throat for those higher notes so that it doesn't sound too thin at the top. So we'll start with B flat. And then a D flat major. For this one here, I find the trickiest part is always just making sure that you remember all of those G flats, and also just that lower section with all of that pinky work from the D flat to the E flat, getting over there really quickly. So that's definitely one thing to work on for this one. Alright, and if you're interested in playing piccolo, there are scales for piccolo as well. Now for those ones, because we don't have the C or the D flat on the piccolo, that's just the A flat chromatic and then the B flat major scale and arpeggio. So I'm just going to warm up a little bit. Alright, so for that A flat chromatic, it's really important to just, it gets quite high up there, so just keeping that support and also that transition from the sort of lower, sort of more earthy tones of the piccolo to a sort of above that E, F, G, up into the higher, more clear tones. So we'll start with the A flat chromatic. And then for the B flat major scale and the arpeggio, the same thing as with the flute, making sure that those lower register notes are nice and full, and then trying to keep that fullness as you go up through the top notes. And especially with that arpeggio, those high notes are going to speak so clearly on the piccolo anyway, and you need a lot of force to get them out anyway. So it's important to really focus on those low notes so that it's not sort of a disproportionate, you're playing quietly in the low end, and then as you get higher you sort of shriek and play really loudly. So we'll do the B flat major scale and arpeggio. those are the scales for flute and piccolo editions for Ontario Provincial Honor Band. So now we're going to work on Etude Set A for Ontario Provincial Honor Band. Let's start with Etude number 1. So this etude is definitely, I think, one that really showcases a lot of versatility. You need to have a nice, clear, beautiful legato type of tone for the first couple lines, which are quite low as well. And as it gets higher, it becomes more of an exercise of evenness of fingers, as well as maintaining that nice legato sound, especially as you just go right back down into that lower register. A couple things that I kind of am keeping in mind are watching out for all of those different two-note slurs, which are sort of the kinds of details that you really need to pay attention to in a study like this. And also in something like bar 8, when it's going from that low A flat through the arpeggio up to the other octave, in something like that, really sort of keeping it even, because it's that sort of transition that if you can get it really smooth, it really helps make this piece work. So I'll play maybe the first little bit of it, and then I'll work through some of the middle higher parts as well. So from the beginning. Now, with those particular phrases there, I know it's always a tendency to sort of want to breathe at the bar line, but it's important that a lot of these phrases actually start on pickups. So when you're picking out places to breathe and marking your places to breathe, it's often good to look at those 8 notes, and often I like to breathe before then. So for example, even at the end of bar 2, the phrase actually starts with that E flat with the. So with something like that, you're going to want to breathe not at the bar line, but actually after the G. And then as you move up into the end of the second and the third and the fourth lines, it does become a little bit more technical. So one thing that I always like to focus on is, keeping a really good suppleness and evenness of fingers. And also just pushing towards that first beat of the bar so that it still retains a sort of musical feel, even though it is 16 notes. And it's also a bit slower, so you can have that liberty. So just from bar 9. So as you play through those sorts of phrases, especially in bar 10, make sure to notice those accidentals. And if you're not super familiar with playing in A flat, also all of those D flats as you get higher up there. And I actually think that this excerpt works really well on piccolo as well, just because it does showcase that versatility. So if you are looking to audition on piccolo as well, this is definitely one that I would recommend maybe. So maybe I'll play a little bit of it on piccolo as well. The same sorts of ideas apply when you're working on this with piccolo, except for that, especially transition bars like that bar 8 with the A flat, C, E flat, A flat, is definitely going to be a bit more of a challenge, I think, on the piccolo, especially if you're not as used to playing it. So those are definitely bars to work on so that you get a nice even. So I'll just play the first couple lines on the piccolo as well. And so on and so forth. So yeah, when you're playing it with the piccolo, it is really important to sort of work on those transitions so that you don't get any, odd notes, and that everything is even and smooth as you transfer from sort of that first part of the study to the second part of the study. All right, so moving on to Etude number 2. This one has a lot of arpeggio work in it. So even away from the study, the first thing I would do is just work on some of my F major scales and arpeggios. 2 octaves, just doing work. Just, working on fingerings like that so I can really sort of get it under my fingers, because a lot of this study is based on those sorts of arpeggios. And one thing that I would definitely keep in mind is, just like when we're playing the arpeggios away from the study, in bars like bars 5 and bars 6, it does have those dynamics that follow the register, so higher at the top and lower at the bottom. But those sorts of things will actually happen naturally, so while it's important to definitely emphasize the dynamics, you don't want to go too overboard, because then it'll just end up, super, super loud at the top and then not enough meat at the bottom of that arpeggio. Other things that I'd keep in mind with this one, for the most part, it's a really good study to use your thumb B flat as well, for the most part, just because it avoids some of those nasty cross fingerings. So we'll just play the first 2 lines of this one. And then as you get higher, sort of just, it's very important to continue through that line and, work on those E naturals, because oftentimes those are the notes that, E naturals and F sharps are usually kind of the notes up there that tend to sound a little thin or are a little more difficult to get in tune. So as you're working in, for example, bar 9 with all of those E naturals, it's really important to work on that. And if you don't play it with your pinky up, that's usually, that usually can help with both the tuning and the tone quality of it. So we'll start from the pickup to bar 9. I'll just play another line or so. Right? And especially with that bar 10, that kind of travels the whole arpeggio from top to bottom, so that's an important sort of transition bar that you're going to really want to work through slowly. Right. So moving on to Etude number 3. This one is one where I definitely recommend taking a look at it with the metronome, just because if you look at the second last and last line, there are a lot of 16th notes, but there are also a lot of 16th note triplets. So it's really important to sort of make sure that that all sort of jives together and that you're hitting all the beats correctly. So I would definitely take a look at those 2 lines sort of rhythmically to make sure that you have the correct, okay, this is the 16th note rhythm and this is the triplet 16th note rhythm. Also in the second line, particularly in sort of bars 13, 14, 15, there's a lot of very particular articulations. There's 3-note slur, 3-note staccato, and then in bar 15 there's groups of 2. So just making sure that you notice all those details and that you have a nice clear staccato that still has a nice round tone but is on the shorter side, and then that you carry through all those slurs as well. So I'll just play the first 2 lines for now, and then we'll talk some more about the triplets and that sort of modulated area. go into the end of the study, like I said, definitely making sure that you can differentiate between those triplet 16th notes and those normal 16th notes. And one thing to work on with those triplets is to make sure that they are completely even, so that they don't sound more like, there are two notes grouped quickly at the beginning or two notes grouped quickly at the end. What you want is like a nice even group of three. There is a bit of leeway, creative license at the last line with that writ and the fermata. I wouldn't get too carried away with that, but it gives you a little bit of wiggle room there. So I'll play out the last two lines from the pickup to bar 17. And that's it for this set of etudes. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact your teacher. Good luck with your audition.
And we don't care about the young folks talking